So we're just a little over a year into our new arrangement of 5 parishes, and there's some conversation. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good, but we are where we're at, and we're doing what we're doing. And I thought that it might be really helpful for us on the Feast of Christ the King, which is really about the fact that Christ is over everything, all in all. That it would be a good time for us to just take a little bit of a broad scope picture to see where we're at, because I'm firmly convinced that 90% of the things that people complain about church have nothing to do with the essence of the church. They're other things. And so I thought it might be a great place to start this morning by saying what church is not. So I kind of reflected back over my 30-some years of priesthood, and I came up with at least 4. This isn't exhaustive, but 4 things that sometimes people think church is that it really isn't. First one is this. Some people think the church is a business. It's a business where I come and pay and then I get what I want. Or it's a place where it's just really about all they want is money. We don't care about anything else, so it's just kind of a business. Well, the church isn't that. I've had experiences like that. I know that I've buried relatives in the Chicago metropolitan area, or have had weddings there, and I don't think I could function in some of those parishes. I remember having an uncle's funeral one time, and it was like a car wash. They had 2 funerals and a wedding that day, and they were running through them. Now you got about 40 minutes for this one because we got to get somebody else in here. They were so thrilled to death to have an outsider in to take some of their workload off. They went off and had a cup of coffee while I had the funeral. I couldn't work in a place like that. They just run them through. One place had 5 weddings a weekend. Just kill me now. You know, church isn't a business. Another thing that we hear people say about church a lot of times is that it's kind of an elite club. And a lot of times people on the outside feel that way looking in. Kind of an elite club where you pay your dues and you get your perks, okay? And it's really just kind of for the insiders. Well, I don't know what that is, but it's not a church that Christ ever had anything to do with, because he was all about inviting and gathering in. And it was really the people who were kind of that self-righteous, kind of looking down at other people that Jesus was after all the time. And so it's never just about kind of an inside crowd, although a lot of times if you're on the outside, it might feel that way. And so that's why we need to look at hospitality and how welcoming we are, and what does that look like as we live our daily lives in our parish. Another one that seems to be popular among a small group of people is they look at church as the police or the enforcers, okay? So it's Father's job to hammer down. So I remember a man coming up to me one time after Mass, not here, this was many years ago, and he said, "Father, if you just tell them young people that premarital sex is wrong, they'll stop." And I said, I never thought about that. It has never occurred to me. I'll do it Sunday. I'm sure they'll cross their legs and we'll never have any trouble again, Really? And a lot of times if you go to a new parish, if somebody's got an axe to grind with somebody in the parish, they'll come to the priest, they'll say, "Well, Father, there's this guy and he's doing thus and so, and you got to go talk to him." And I say, you seem to have a handle on the situation. Why don't you go talk to him? Like we're the police. Church is not the police. It's not the enforcer of rules. I think we used to be that way, but thank God we're getting out of that, because it was never in our job description in the first place. I remind you what I've been saying over and over and over again, is that Christ never came to give us rules. You look at this book. There's only one rule, and it was the law of what? What? Love. That's the only one he gave us. And so he didn't come to give us rules. He came to give us principles on how you and I are called to live our lives, okay? So it's not about the enforcer. The fourth one that I'm using just as an example that maybe more people could relate to is people who look at church as a destination. I go to church like I go shopping, or I go on vacation, or I go to get a colonoscopy, or I go to the bathroom, okay? It's something that I go and I check off the list. It doesn't say be a part. It doesn't say get to know people. It doesn't say be active. It's just get her done, get her off the list. Okay? And if church is just, if our faith is only one of a bunch of things that are going on, even if they're really good things, if it's just one of those things and it's not number one, it's always going to be inconvenient. It's always going to be a pain in the neck. And I think I've told you the story before about some friends of mine. Well, I think they're still friends of mine. I was covering Mass in Rickardsville one Saturday night. And these people are coming out, and I'm talking to them out in front of church, and they were from Key West. And I said, what are you guys doing around here? Oh, we just thought we'd come to Mass. And so I talked a little bit more, and I said, well, are you coming back from someplace? They said, no, we're just... So finally I said, how come you're at Mass in Rickardsville tonight? And they said, well, we got a new priest. Mass is about 15 minutes longer. So they drove from Key West to Rickardsville. And I laughed. I said, you should be ashamed of yourselves. And then they wound up with me for the preacher. So they were really screwed, you know. And so it's any of these different ways of looking at church will give you something to complain about. The time, the length, the location, they're always going to give you something to complain about if you're not focused on what the scriptures help us to understand church is about. And today's 3 short scripture readings are great for that. The first reading from the book of Ezekiel used what image? We sang it as the responsorial psalm. About a shepherd and a flock. It's not about a building. It's not about rules. It's not about money. It's about what? A relationship. And what did that shepherd do? He says, he finds himself among scattered sheep and tends them, rescues them. Okay? I will give them rest. I will seek them out. The strayed I'll bring back. The injured I'll bind up. The sick I will heal. So Pope Francis used a wonderful image. He said the church should be a field hospital. It's where wounded people come when there's a war going on, and they come to get healed. And when he gave that example, he said, when somebody comes in, they got their arm shot off or something, you don't chew them out because they have high cholesterol. You fix the leg, you get them healed up, and then you say, no, there may be some other things we need to help you with here, huh? But it needs to be a place that gathers people together, okay? Not trying to decide who should be here and who shouldn't. The second reading that we had today from Corinthians, a little hard to understand that reading today. It's kind of a dense text. But the last part said this, talking about Christ. When finally all has been subjected to the Son, he will then subject himself to the one who made all things subject to him, so that God may be all in all. What's that mean for us? It means this. One of the jobs of the church, one of the vocations of the church, is to help people to understand that God is number one. Above everything, above your kids, above your spouse, above your job, above everything. If God is number one, everything else will fall into place. Scout's honor, not my idea, comes from the book. And so it's the church's job. So when people say, well, you know, the church can't say, of course we can. Don't ask the church not to be what it's supposed to be. It should always call us to a greater accountability. It should always make us question our priorities, no matter how good our priorities are. And then that brings us to today's gospel. And folks, I don't know how we could listen to this gospel. There is no other interpretation than what it is today. So Jesus gives this talk, and he's saying, you know, understand this. When I was hungry, when I was thirsty, when I was a stranger, when I was naked, when I was ill and in prison, you helped. You helped me. So what does that say church is for us? This is the strongest teaching that Jesus ever gives in the Scriptures. And it tells us that, first of all, Christ came to the earth to transform people's lives. Jesus didn't come to the earth to start St. Mark's Catholic Church in Edgewood, Iowa. In fact, he didn't come to earth to build St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. He came to earth to transform people's lives. Now, if St. Mark's Church or St. Peter's Basilica in Rome helps people to transform the lives of others, terrific. But if it's not, this whole joint is worthless. It's worthless. No matter how nice we are, no matter how great the music is, it's worthless if it's not changing people's lives. And so in today's gospel, do you realize, I thought about this as I was preparing for my homily this weekend. Do you realize that today's gospel is the only time that Jesus very politely tells us to go to hell? It's the only time. It's the only time. So when he says, I had all these things going on, and those on the left, this is nothing against people who raise goats, incidentally. They said, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or naked or ill or in prison and attend to your needs? He said, anytime anybody was in need and you didn't do anything, that was me. And before that, he says, out of my sight you condemned into that everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. He says, go to hell. Oh, my is right. We should all feel that way. I've been preaching this gospel every 3 years for 33 years. That never occurred to me until this time. So don't say there's never anything new in the Scriptures. What's that tell us? What's that tell us? First of all is this. Who is the church? What is the church? First of all, it's Christ. First of all, it's Christ. Secondly, it's you, me, and all kinds of other people who we will never meet in our lives. That's the church. It's not the four walls. This is a house for the church. It's a great house for the church, but it's not the church. Okay? My home parish is closed. The church didn't die. The only one of the ways that I can deal with the pain of that happening is the fact that the pillars of that faith community are now members of other parishes, and they're very active there. We've certainly seen that in this area, particularly with the folks from Greeley. They came and they got active. Okay? That's what church is. And so that's why we've been saying for the past 3 years, don't just go to church, be church. Folks, we can't afford to just go to church. We can't afford it. He didn't call us to go. Jesus never said, go to church. But he did, in very many ways in the Scriptures, tell us to be church. It's about our relationships, it's about who we are for each other, and it's whether or not we're tending to the needs of those in our midst. And if you don't know anybody in need, you just are not looking. So as we continue to pray on this Feast of Christ the King, it's really about trying to, first of all, in our own houses and our own hearts, say, how can I continue to try to make Christ number one? And if I'm doing that, then how am I doing what Christ came to the earth to do, is to transform the lives of others. Not by going to church, but by being church.